A viral video of a young girl terrorizing a local Walmart gets everyone's attention and begs the question, where in the world is this girl's parents?
I can't even tell you that. I don't know.
And Donald Trump sends an explosive tweet that gets the attention of those in the Middle East. And he says there will be hell to pay if they don't cough up those hostages by the time he takes office in January. And then finally, HBO announces that J.K. Rowling is back in the creative seat, helping produce their new Harry Potter series. This is great news for Harry Potter fans, and most importantly, it's great news for you and me and everyone in the culture, because the vocal minority did not win. And I'll tell you why today on Indie Thinker. Welcome to the show. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Today's sponsor is our friends over at Sweet and Savory. Now, help me help you. I want to do you a favor. I know that you're probably struggling with your cooking skills. I know that you're sick and tired of burning that food, and Christmas dinner is right around the corner. And if you want to bless your family and bless your in-laws, they'll return if you do that, just letting you know. But if you want to do that, then you need to take your cooking game to the next level. And you can do that in a fun and entertaining way by checking out our sponsors over at Sweet and Savory. You can book a date night at their classroom. You'll have the time of your life, and you'll learn while you're doing it to cook a 5-star meal. And if you're not in the Chattanooga and you can't attend the classroom in person, you can go to their online classes where you can look through an array of content that will help you cook the most amazing meals. You can do that with the whole family. You can give that away as a gift, but it is a blessing to anybody, especially if maybe you want to subtly nudge the sister-in-law and just tell her, hey, the cooking needs a little bit of a brush up. Now, Sweet and Savory can help with all that. All you need to do is go to sweetandsavory.com, and when you check out, make sure to use the promo code IndieThinker to let them know that we sent you and to get a discount off of your order. And by the way, you'll thank me later. I have a theory. It could be totally wrong, but let's face it, nobody knows, so my theory is just as great as anybody else's. But I think there was one thing that tipped the scales in favor of Donald Trump in this past election. Now, you could go all the way back to the garbage truck, and that was absolutely awesome. You could go back to the absolutely amazing troll of going to the McDonald's and talking about Kamala Harris. You could go to the rallies and all of these various things to talk about why Donald Trump won in 2024 and why he will be the new president in 2025. But I think there is actually one moment in particular that sealed the deal for him, and that is when he barely missed a bullet grazing his ear, and then falling down to the ground, getting back up, blood running down his face, shouting, "Fight, fight, fight." I think that iconic moment is the one thing that sealed the deal for his future presidency. Now, you may disagree with this if you don't like Donald Trump, if you didn't vote for him, if you thought Kamala Harris was just phenomenal on the Call Her Daddy podcast. You are seething with resentment that you don't really have the objectivity necessary to understand how big of a moment this was for Donald Trump and for America. But to refresh your memory, here's what it looked like.
My shoes, sir.
Hold that in your head, it's bloody.
So we gotta move to the bus. Move to the bus. Let me get my shoes.
Okay, my shoes down. My shoes.
Watch out.
Wait.
Now, the reason this moment is so iconic and so important for American history, and something I don't think we'll ever forget, is that most men, I mean strong men, don't have the wherewithal in a moment where their life is at stake to get up, pump their fist in the air, and shout, "Fight, fight, fight," with blood running down their face. Those images from that moment will not be erased from the American consciousness, nor should they be. It's an important moment because it is truly courage on display. Now, even if you want to give Donald Trump an uncharitable take and just simply say, well, Donald Trump is a narcissist. He wasn't telling people to fight for democracy or to fight against evil or anything like that. He was just saying fight for yourself. So even if you want to give him that kind of uncharitable take and say that it was purely narcissism, maybe because he's he's been attacked so much by the Justice Department and by the Democrats and through impeachments and Russiagate and all of the nonsense that's been thrown against this man, that he was just merely saying, fight for me. That's the most uncharitable take that you can possibly give Donald Trump, and it still makes him look like a freaking hero, because he knows that there are people standing in his way, and those people will stop at nothing, and he's saying we must fight this. Now, ultimately, I would give him a more charitable take and say, I think Donald Trump knows very well that there are a group of people in America, call them globalist, call them secular humanist, and they want to destroy what America has always stood for. They want to redefine marriage, they want to redefine what it means to be a boy and what it means to be a girl, and then they want to go one extra step and then make sure that they cut off the body parts of individuals in order to make that facade become a little bit more real. But you can't lie to biology, and you can't lie to the American consciousness, because America stands for something, and it always has. It stands for freedom. It stands for religious liberty, and whether you like it or not, stands for traditional values and the Christian moral values that formed the West and created this great nation, that gave us the Declaration of Independence, that says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. So all of that, I think Trump was keeping in mind, at least in a tangential or tertiary way, when he understood that there are people who want to stop him because he is a threat to their established order. And he was saying, we will not stop. They can try everything they can to attack me and to attack you, but we will not stop. Keep fighting. I actually think it wasn't a narcissistic move whatsoever. I think it was actually a move of unbridled courage. Let's just put it that way. And here's the real thing we all have to consider. The real narcissism isn't a man that's asking for Americans to fight for what they believe in, but the real narcissism is a kind of pseudo-pacifism that's taken over the Christian church, Christian thinking, and so much of America that wants to sit back, enjoy Netflix, rather than to fight for the things that we hold dear. So I think the real narcissism is pacifism. Now, to be clear, I understand that pacifism actually has some tenets that are really, really helpful. I think nonviolent resistance is the way to go, but I actually think that so often we equate pacifism with disengagement, and that's when we really have a problem, because we have a responsibility to care for this world, to make sure that it is the best world that we can possibly produce for our kids and for future generations. All that to say this, I think pacifism, if we're not careful, can be nothing but a virtue signal, where we say, well, look at me, I'm so much better than everybody else because I refuse to get my hands dirty. I'll pray for you, while the people who are actually making a difference in the world are actually putting their hand to the plow and really doing something. All that to say, especially if you're a Christian, even if you're a person of good conscience, we have a responsibility to change the culture and to fight for it. If you're not willing to fight for it and you only want to play defense, it's probably because you're more interested in the status quo than you are in truly making a better America. And I understand defense, especially for Christians, is really comfortable. We've been playing it for so long, I don't think we understand how to play offense anymore. I think we like playing defense because then we don't have to be responsible for actually scoring any points. This is why when actually Christians go out there and do make a difference and then get a target on their back, this is why even fellow Christians will wag their finger at them and say, shame, 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 that you actually expressed an opinion different than mine. Well, the reason for that is that, one, I think that Christians, whenever actually somebody is doing something, they have the tendency to try to denigrate what that person is doing so that they can feel more comfortable about their complacency. But also, I think just simply putting points on the board does put a target on your back, and it makes it easy for people to point their finger to you. And I think subconsciously we all know that. And that's why we are hesitant to put points on the board, to actually build something, to actually make a difference, to actually get in the arena and fight. It's time we stopped. And it's time we realized that we have to get in the fight for the future of America, for the future of our kids, for the future of our faith. Or we will find that the world that we give them, that they inherit, will be vastly different than even the world that we now live in. And by the way, looks like clown world. So if it can get worse, we better do whatever we can to make sure that it doesn't. That's why I think it's important for us to fight. And we'll talk about why in our top stories today. A viral video caught the attention of a lot of people online, but apparently not the attention of Walmart employees or any adults in the room. As a young girl walked through Walmart and then started to terrorize the place, destroying everything that was in her path, we see a very unsettling scene, not only because this girl was allowed to do this and there doesn't seem to be any parents in sight, but there also doesn't seem to be very many bold people in sight who are willing to actually go up and confront this young girl. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people who say, well, I don't want the police called on me because I'm harassing somebody else's child, or I don't want that heat of, of actually putting my hand on somebody else's kid, and there's too many implications involved with all that, too many legal implications. Now, to that, I can only tell you one thing. Obviously, you should handle this situation with care, but if you don't handle it because of some, quote, legal concern, you are not just flabbergasted, you are not just amazed, but you are also a coward. And we are raising up a generation of cowards that will hide behind legality and red tape and all of these other things instead of actually doing what they should do. So I want to show you this viral clip of this young girl going through Walmart and absolutely terrorizing the place. So there she is stomping something on the ground, grabbing things from a deli case and throwing it on the ground. And then you have an adult, actually, who has the boldness to say, don't yell at her, you don't know what she's going through, so just kind of leave her alone, I suppose. Just let her do her thing because she has the right to throw a tantrum in public. This is kind of this regressive parenting, by the way. Let's have a conversation about it rather than to discipline this child. Of course, she picks up a bunch of glass bottles, and throws them on the ground, and then finally an adult comes and talks to her. Now, when I first posted this, I posted an idea about stakeholder capitalism and tried to explain how absolutely idiotic it is based upon the fact that you have a whole bunch of employees standing around staring at this young girl as she's doing this. So all that pushed to the side, I think stakeholder capitalism is an idiotic idea, and that the businesses that were started by people and the CEOs of these businesses that bear all of the risk and the burden and all of the sweat equity of really making this business even happen in the first place so that these people can have a job, I think those people absolutely deserve to get paid way more than the employees underneath them. Anyway, I took that post down though, and here's why. Because I actually think that there's a much more important thing to discuss and a much more important thing to kind of look at underneath this story. And it's so important to me that I didn't want anything to interfere with it, and it's the idea of parents. Because obviously the biggest issue here is that there's not a parent in sight anywhere stopping this young girl from doing this stuff. Now, there was some commotion online as to whether or not this young girl was autistic and she was having kind of a meltdown. And there are some parents of autistic kids that have developed a philosophy of saying, hey, let the kid have the meltdown, and then eventually they'll calm down, because once they get like that, there's no real way to calm them down. So listen, I get it. I've never had an autistic kid. I don't really know what it's like, and I've heard it can be a bit of a hellish experience. It can test your patience. It can test, your parenting. It can test your faith and so much more. So look, I get it. I understand it can be very difficult, but I think I've also spoken with enough parents of autistic children to safely be able to say that the right way to handle an autistic kid who is doing this kind of stuff is to stop them, is to discipline them. I haven't heard the exception yet that actually even passes muster in terms of common sense, because guess what all kids, regardless of autistic or not, will do when they do not feel like they have consequences? They will do exactly this. So it's important to discipline your autistic kid and hold them to the same standard as you would other kids, at least in terms of your expectations of them. Yeah, you're going to have to navigate some things and all of that, but it is a parent's job to make sure that they understand that there is not an exception to the biblical rule. Spare the rod, spoil the child. Now, this all comes, I think, from this modern philosophy of parenting that says that your kids are supposed to know that you love them. They're supposed to know that you care for them and that you are their friend. And I have to tell you, yes, I want my kid to know that I love him. Yes, I want my kid to know that he means the world to me. He's one of the most important things on the planet to me. But because he is, I also want him to know that discipline is coming for him if he does something that he shouldn't do, because I care about him. He's not my Hunter Biden. I'm not going to alleviate him of consequences. And no, I'm not going to sit on the Walmart floor and have a healing conversation with him when he's disobeying and being disrespectful and breaking things around the store. No, he's going to pay for it. So all that to say, I think this comes back to an idea of parenting that is breaking down in our midst. I mean, if we're going to blame anybody here, I don't even blame this young girl. I blame adults. Maybe this young girl got the idea that you can rampage through a Walmart like this because of clips like this. So maybe, just maybe, when our adults act like this, the kids are getting the message loud and clear. But certainly I can tell you this much. We are watching the erosion of the family right in front of us. And this is actually what's to blame here. The fact that there is no parent around to stop this young girl, regardless of the episode that she's having, says everything. It says that we've redefined what the family's supposed to look like. We've got Jaguar ads telling us that we don't need normal anymore. We've got Volkswagen ads telling us that the family can be whatever you want it to be.
They say you can't choose your family. Well, we beg to differ. Because family can be whoever or whatever you want it to be.
And this breakdown of the family has absolutely militated against healthy societal institutions and healthy children. Now, I want to point to one cultural institution that has probably destroyed the family more so than anything else, and that's the media. Because I want to take you to a time not so long ago, before Will Smith slapped Chris Rock in the face. And I want to show you when TV shows actually upheld strong male role models and showed how important fathers were to young men. Check it out.
I'm gonna get a great job without him. I'm gonna marry me a beautiful honey, and I'm having me a whole bunch of kids. I'm gonna be a better father than he ever was. And I sure as hell don't need him for that, because ain't a damn thing he could ever teach me about how to love my kids. How come he don't want me, man?
If that doesn't send chills down your spine, I don't know what will. Because right there, Will Smith is at his peak. This is peak Will Smith. Before the slap incident, when he was still rapping and telling us stories on TV that needed to be heard, he was portraying things like this, that deep down in the heart of every single boy is the cry for a father. We all need our parents, to be sure, but especially young men right now need their dad. But so much of our media has militated against the family by trying to redefine marriage, redefine what a healthy family looks like. Now, I want to encourage you to do something. I want you to watch a movie called Little Boy. Do it this Christmas holiday season. Do it with your boys. I want you to watch it, and I defy you, as a man, not to watch that movie and cry. And I don't ever cry, because I think you lose your man card unless you're cutting onions or watching Little Boy. I defy you to watch that movie and not only not cry, but also walk away from it and then not think that we need more shows like this, more movies like this that illustrate the power of the family, the power of the role of a father in a little boy's life. We need, especially Christians and people of conscience, to stand up right now and create the counterculture. And one of those things is going to be to restore the family. We need people to fight that fight. It's worth fighting for. All right, now the next thing I want to mention to you is definitely a fight worth having as well, because Donald Trump is already showing us what foreign policy is supposed to look like, even though he is not yet even in the White House. He recently posted this on Truth Social. Everybody is talking about the hostages who are being held so violently, inhumanely, and against the will of the entire world in the Middle East. But it's all talk, no action. Please let this truth serve to represent that if the hostages are not released prior to January 20th, 2025, the date that I proudly assume office as President of the United States, there will be all hell to pay in the Middle East, and for those in charge who perpetrated these atrocities against humanity. Those responsible will be hit harder than anybody has been hit in the long and storied history of the United States of America. Release the hostages now. Speaking of sending chills down your spine, that dude continues to send chills down my spine. That is just absolutely awesome. This comes in the wake, too, of the ceasefire that was supposedly brokered by Joe Biden absolutely being destroyed only days later after it was supposedly brokered. And then Israel had to defend itself and then continue to fight. So let me just be really clear with you. Hezbollah had no intention of actually honoring a ceasefire because they don't actually care about a ceasefire. So all of this ceasefire now, all of these Free Palestine protests were absolutely misguided from the very beginning. And also, there's the word, it's escaping me now. What is it? Oh yeah, anti-Semitic. And Israel knows this very well. Here in the West, we seem to have totally forgotten this, but Hezbollah doesn't actually care about civilians, nor did Hamas. That's why they're still holding on to 100 hostages, and that's why civilian casualties are stacking up. See, it's not all Israel's fault. There are casualties in every single war that has ever existed, and there's never going to be an exception to this rule. And unfortunately, while there are still evil people in the world, war will be a necessary evil. And the war that is taking place, that took place in Gaza and is taking now place between Hezbollah and Lebanon and in other regions, the reason it is taking place and the reason a ceasefire was always misguided is because the individuals who are fighting against Israel actually use civilian casualties as shields. And they don't give a darn about any civilian casualties. So you can blame Israel all day long for all of that if you want to. And you can take the numbers that are given to you by the Gaza Ministry of Health run by Hamas if you want to. I, for one, like to think a little bit more clearly than that. But just know this, that a ceasefire in that area is never truly going to be tenable because of the people who are in that area who do not want peace. Now, the reason this is so important for us is that I think in America, we're very mistaken about what human nature actually looks like. See, we assume human kindness because we live in the West. But what you're not understanding is that the West was settled by the Crusades and Christians who won those Crusades. Now, you're not going to like that argument because, of course, the Crusades was a time where evil things took place. And of course they did. But ultimately, the Crusades were undeniably and historically speaking a defensive war against marauding and militating Muslims who were trying to conquer the known world. That's why Pope Urban actually in the Council of Chalcedon, I can't remember exactly, but one of the councils anyway, stood up and said, hey, you guys understand that we're being attacked constantly. We got to do something about this. We have to defend ourselves. And he gave that rousing speech that started the Crusades, I think around 1070 or so. The reason he gave that speech is because if he hadn't, Muslims would be conquering the world, and then the West wouldn't exist as it does today, which has been fueled largely by Greek philosophy and Christian values, Judeo-Christian values, I'll say. All that to say this, that because they live in a different part of the world, they think differently than we do. They don't care about civilian casualties. They don't care about the milk of human kindness. They don't actually care about peace. You know what they want? They want to conquer everything. They want to conquer you. They want to conquer me. They want to conquer the West because it is largely Christian, and they hate that. And it's important that you understand human nature from this perspective, one, so that you can appreciate the Christian moral values that undergird your moral philosophy, even if you're not a Christian, but then also, most importantly, so that you can understand the way foreign policy actually has to work in the Middle East. And it is exactly what Donald Trump just showed you. The only way to truly achieve peace is through fighting. It is through strength. The Reagan doctrine is 100% correct. Trump shows us in this tweet exactly how foreign policy has to be done. It has to be done through strength. It can't be done through concessions. It can't be done through giving tons of money, barrelfuls full of money to terrorists who have no desire to actually pursue peaceful democracy. No, we have to make sure that, yes, we are the world's police force. See, I'm not one of those neocon or an isolationist. I believe that we are the world's police force in the sense that we have an obligation to stand by the moral principles that hold a nation together. And if we don't, then we can expect the rest of the world to dwindle into chaos right around us and then eventually encroach upon our borders. Maybe we're seeing that. All that to say that I think it's a moral good for us if we have it within our power to do something good for the rest of the world. To not do that is not good. Now, sure, America first, baby. Let's make sure that we've got what we need here, but let's also not forget that our brother and our sisters across the sea, that if they need our help, If a World War III breaks out because there's another person trying to send people to concentration camps, well, then we are immoral to sit back and do nothing. So we have an obligation to use what strength we have, what privileges we have here in the West to ensure peace throughout the world to the best of our ability, because it's in the interest of everyone involved. And if you love people, you'll care about what's happening to them. You'll care about their plight. I understand that there are economic realities that we have to face in the homeland first. But we also shouldn't neglect the fact that this globe that we're on, we're all on it, regardless of borders. And what happens around the world can eventually come to our door. Now, I think Trump understands that. That's why he understands that we have to fight and that we have to fight for peace. Now, last thing about this. This is antithetical to most of us. We don't understand how you can fight for peace. Isn't peace being an absolutely spineless jellyfish and just sitting back and trying to tell everybody that you love them? I mean, don't you see this acoustic guitar and me singing Kumbaya? How can you not understand peace? See, again, this is totally misguided and it is totally unchristian. The real kind of peace that Jesus wants to give us is peace in the midst of the storm, peace in the midst of fighting. So it is not an excuse for us to sit back on the fights that truly matter. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. The ideological fight that we're having in America today is one that needs to be fought so that we do not have to make this thing physical. And if we refuse to fight it because we're just going to sit on our hands and try to use religious platitudes, quote scripture out of context and excuse our complacency, then we will watch the world crumble around us, and then we won't have to wonder why, I guess. At least you'll have that consolation. It was because you sat on the sidelines when you could have actually made a difference. So this is the good thing that we get from Donald Trump, and hopefully that we will take to heart as Christians that we need to fight, we need to stand for what's right, and when we do, we can actually make a difference, which we'll see in our final story today. Because I'm proud to announce to you that J.K. Rowling is back at HBO. Because according to Variety, HBO says Harry Potter series will benefit from J.K. Rowling's involvement. She has the right to express her personal views. So that's right, J.K. Rowling will be back at the helm of the new Harry Potter series that they're going to be releasing on HBO very soon. But you may be asking, why is she being brought back after all the hue and cry from those screeching through their cross-sex hormones?
So I want to recognize that your line of questioning is transphobic.
After all of the effort to try to cancel J.K. Rowling just because she has a basic belief in biology, how come Warner Brothers is now accepting her back to be a creative influence in this series? Now, if you might suggest that it's because maybe the folks over at Warner Brothers grew a spine or maybe a conscience, well, you sweet summer child, all I can say to you is,
Jane, you ignorant slut.
No, that's probably not what happened, but let's read the article a little bit further. When J.K. Rowling first went public in June 2020 about her belief that transgender women are men and transgender men are women, let me rephrase and say her belief that biology exists, many of the stars of the Harry Potter and Fantastic Beasts movies, let me rephrase again, many of the cowards of the Harry Potter and Fantastic Beasts movies, including Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, Rupert Grint, and Eddie Redmayne, immediately spoke out in support of trans and non-binary rights and identity. Two of the biggest Harry Potter fan communities, MuggleNet and the Leaky Cauldron, denounced Rowling's views and severed ties with the author's future projects. And Warner Brothers released a carefully worded statement that a diverse and inclusive culture has never been more important to our company and our audiences around the world. So that's why they listened to a group of people who made sure to scream and cancel anybody that disagreed with them, because they're all into that whole inclusion thing. But the article goes on and it says, which, while not mentioning Rowling or trans and binary people, did at least put some rhetorical distance between the studio and the creative force behind one of its most enduring and lucrative franchises. But all that recently changed when they announced on November 12th that Rowling was very, very involved in the process, selecting the writer and the director, and going further to state that her quote-unquote anti-trans statements haven't affected the casting or hiring of writers or production staff. Now imagine that. The person that created Harry Potter that they tried to distance themselves from is actually beneficial to the series. Now, why did this really happen? Might it have something to do with the fact that Warner Brothers was dangerously close to careening off the edge just like Disney, and they experienced a over $40 billion loss as they were trying to make everything gay? That's right, fans started to speak out, and fans recognized that when you destroy things and you deconstruct them, that it actually doesn't make them better. Trying to make everything about DEI actually really didn't make substantive stories or meaningful characters. And fans have spoken. And the most important thing, the usually silent majority of fans have started to speak, even if it was just simply with their wallet, making it so that the studio understood all of a sudden that maybe the screeching minority isn't people we should be making series for. I know, wild thought. If you're going to actually talk about inclusion, maybe you should make stories that appeal to the universal truths of mankind rather than just a small minority of people.
And I want it lame!
Regardless of the motivation, it's a good thing that J.K. Rowling is back, simply because the person who is best suited to make a good Harry Potter series is the person who created Harry Potter. Amazon Rings of Power keeps on making the same mistake. They think they can absolutely destroy a series that is beloved by millions of people and expect people to actually want to watch it. No, rather, Warner Brothers is starting to learn the lessons of Amazon and Disney and is bringing back the person who is best suited to actually make a good story. I know, wild, right? You guys are not actually in the business of propaganda, but in the business of good storytelling. So all that to say, there is one more important truth through all of this, is that this is not just good for JK, this is not just good for Harry Potter fans, but this is also good for the culture. Because Rowling put her life effort into this story. She poured her sweat and her tears into this thing, and over 20 years created one of the biggest franchises the world has ever known. And it is wrong to take that away from her because of a group of people who got their feelings hurt online. She worked hard, and to defraud her of that is immoral and unjust. So you see, when a group of people actually get enough courage to speak with their wallet or even speak out online against the insanity of gender ideology, the insanity of critical race theory, the insanity of identity politics, when a group of people actually stand up against that, they can actually create a moral good in the universe. They can quit defrauding people who have worked hard for things that were on the chopping block of cancel culture. This is good because it means pressure campaigns work, and it means that we can use whatever tools are at our disposal, including even policies, laws, and the government to try to create a better world for each and every one of us. I know this is a crazy thought. Now, some of you may be scratching your head and thinking to yourself, well, who would argue with the fact that if you can use your voice to do good things, then you shouldn't do it? Well, the only people who actually argue that is quite frankly the people whom I love the most and the people who can be the most frustrating, the people in my own house, and that is fellow Christians. See, when I encourage Christians to actually get motivated to make a difference, very often they will do things like quote scripture out of context and say, not by might, not by power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord. And by that, they actually mean, well, we just want to love people into the kingdom, and we just want to go to church, and we'll just be a positive influence in the world by the ways in which we live our life. But we're not going to use the government in order to try to create better laws, to make a better society. No, that would somehow be violating Scripture and violating our Christian beliefs. Somehow we have to believe in a very weak and pacifistic God. Well, the problem with that is this, is that scripture verse is actually intended to help you understand that when you go, you can go with God. And if you go with God, you can actually create huge change. And I've got one other startling fact to help you realize. If you say you believe in something, but then you take zero intentional efforts to actually protect that thing, then you don't actually believe in that thing. And maybe even worse, you're actively, inadvertently militating against the thing that you love. So you can come and you can tell me that you love your child so much. He's your world and you would do anything for your child. But then if you don't feed that child, you don't love that child no matter how heartfelt you were when you said those words. See, belief without action militates against your belief. And this is where I think St. Augustine's words are so appropriate. The great saint, using an analogy from the Old Testament where the children of Israel come out of Egypt, they take all the spoils of Egypt and then they use it to build their holy temple. He says this, and this is kind of a paraphrase, but essentially he says that we should take the spoils of Egypt to build the city of God. In other words, we should take whatever secular tool is at our disposal in order to create a better world. Now, I don't care who you are, that's great advice. But here's the problem. Many people will rail against that because of some misguided belief in their own purity and holiness. What I mean by that is this, is that if you tithe, you give secular tools to your church every single time you do that. And you're doing so in the belief that you can actually make a huge difference with this small secular tool. See, we don't have a problem with that because we've grown accustomed to it. And here's the point at the end of the day. We are going to have to get used to doing things that make us uncomfortable. We're going to have to take our idealism and unrealistic beliefs, and we're going to have to position them in a real world. And not just a real world, clown world, where everything is upside down. If we are actually going to make a difference, we're going to have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. So here's what I mean. We're going to have to use whatever means are at our disposal and whatever tactics are at our disposal within the confines of Scripture in order to make this world a better place. That means whatever strategy, whatever tactic, even whatever tone is necessary to make sure that we stand for truth in this hour. We need to do it because our world is a better place when we do it. And we have too many examples to show us over and over again that if we do, we can actually make a difference. So I'll tell you as Bonhoeffer did, silence in the face of evil is evil itself. So now, let's go make a difference. All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks so much for watching. If this show was beneficial to you, I highly encourage you to go get a membership over at indiethinker.org/support, where you can gain all sorts of perks and exclusives, including ebooks, movies, and so much more. And you can even gift one to a friend. But most importantly, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and go with God.